There's always, of course, a political aspect to economic policy because once the regime gets involved, economic policy fundamentally is really about stealing from some people to help some other people. I mean, there's winners and losers with every policy. So I think it's always important to identify who are the winners and losers in this policy. And with this policy, there are indeed certain winners, and they tend to be people who already own huge amounts of assets. And the people who are losers are people further down the socioeconomic scale. And it's hard to point out, but that's definitely a culture war sort of position. Wall Street and the Fed and the people at the core of the regime who are rich and getting richer. I mean, just look at Congress, look at the Senate, right? This is a body of millionaires and stock traders who are much richer than you, much more powerful than you, who have access to special information, and they're being helped out by all this credit creation, and you don't have access to that sort of thing. I think this is really important to point out. Yeah, we're not arguing, oh, inflation is bad because reason and logic shows us this highly technical reason why. Well, of course, the technical reasons are important to have and understand, but the reality is you're probably being ripped off. And that's our old slogan, right? We study economics to understand how we're being ripped off. And yeah, that's an important concept here. And I think maybe that's one of the best things that Austrians point out is Cantillon effects, right? Is the fact that inflation is not the situation where more money just appears in the economy. It appears in certain places, and it benefits some people faster than others, which means it's benefiting some people at the expense of others. And that's just the reality of inflation. And so maybe understanding better who's benefiting. And that's what Hazlitt was always so good about, right? If you read economics in one lesson, he always included just the right amount of interest group politics to show how this economic policy impacted some groups versus others and how that translated then into politics, because certain groups then were going to push for this sort of policy because it helped them, and other people didn't push for it, or they failed to understand it, and therefore they suffered as a result of those economic policies. So that's very important, and definitely I would say that most of the opponents you see in mainstream debate now about inflation, they're generally getting it wrong. Mostly because that would require significant overhaul of the current situations. It would require a whole lot of bad-mouthing of the banking system and the Fed and other people that I think a lot of these elected officials aren't willing to badmouth yet. But perhaps with enough pressure, they would be willing to do it. But that takes us to the Fed. Let's move on to the Fed and really about the issue of what is the Fed saying about inflation? They just seem they have the most really puerile explanations for it, and they only recently were forced to take it seriously. And to this day now, it's just the tiniest little trimming around the edges. Oh yeah, we're just going to stop adding to our $8-9 trillion portfolio, but we're not going to get rid of it. And I mean, I just don't see any real serious grown up in the room sort of behavior out of the Fed at all.